Welcome to our Research Like a Pro with DNA question and answer series. And we are going to talk about why ask DNA matches to share DNA results. So the question comes up when we're talking about Pro Tools because we now have shared matches that do a lot of the same thing in that they show us how much DNA others of our shared matches match or have in common. So let's just look at a Venn diagram that helps us to understand. And remember, the whole goal of our DNA research is trying to get as many matches as possible on our research objective. So we should have a focused objective for whatever we're trying to do with our DNA, and we want to be looking for all those relevant matches. So let's say you're working on your own DNA matches, and you've got all these matches are in the blue circle. And then you have got a relative's DNA matches. Say this is a first cousin, and they have a big circle of matches they have. And then you have got this area that overlaps where you share matches. Now, if you are using Ancestry Pro Tools, you can see how much DNA your relative and every shared match between these two shares. And that can help you to determine relationships and who some of these shared matches are. But you are not going to pick up all of these other matches that could be exactly what you need for your research problem. And you're not going to see those. So you really would like to have a full match list shared with you if this is a relative that you feel will be really helpful. I thought it would be fun to illustrate this with an example from my Clumsy Cline project that I have worked on the last 2 or 3 years. And so let me just give you my example so you get a little foundation about this project. Using DNA evidence and documentary research, this project aims to test the hypothesis that John C. Cline was the biological father of Clumsy Cline Weatherford. So I have identified someone, and I'm trying to prove through DNA that he was actually her father. John was born in 1785 in Pennsylvania or Virginia, died after 1852. He appears in tax and land records in Izard and Fulton counties, Arkansas, between 1830 and 1852. Clumsy was born about 1820 in Alabama and died after 1880 in Texas. Clumsy married Henderson Weatherford about 1838 in Izard County, Arkansas. Now, the big challenge with this project is that Izard County is a severely burned county, meaning that there are no county records that exist until about 1880. And so this era that could show John and Clumsy, in a probate record or some type of connection just is not there. There's nothing we're going to get. And of course, by the 1850 census, she had already married. She's in her husband's household. And so, through some federal land records and some tax records that were sent to the state and that do exist, I was able to find enough indirect evidence that I felt like John was a father, but it needed some DNA. So let's just look briefly at some of the documentary research that's relevant for DNA. I was very fortunate that John was listed in the 1850 census with a second family. So Milky would not have been Clumsy's mother. She would have been just about 10 or 12 years old and would not work for a mother. So she would have been a second wife. And then we see that there were 4 children born to John and Milky. So Jesse, Abner, Ann, and Amanda. Now we presume because they are not listed, relationships are not listed, we are presuming that they are biological children. We go with the usual case, and that's what the usual case is. So if Clumsy is John's daughter from a previous marriage, these would be half siblings, and their descendants could share DNA with Clumsy's descendants. Now, in 1860, after I had done the project, you'll notice my objective thought that John, he died after 1852. Well, in the course of the research, I found a very probable hit for a John M. Cline, or excuse me, a John M. Cline in Texas. So this W. Cline, they're out in Texas. born in Illinois. There's a Mary, there's a John, young John, and older John, and then there's a Milka. This is not a very usual name. This is kind of different, and it certainly seems like this could be Milky. But we do have some problems. So in this comparison, we have the 1850 census versus 1860. So two different locations. But we've got John, who is still John, but now he's got the middle initial of M, which, as we all know, censuses can have wrong information. And his age should only be 75, but it's quite a bit off. And Virginia is different than Pennsylvania. But Milky is right on with 53. However, birthplace is different. We have got this W. Cline who lines up with Abner, both born Illinois, and 24 versus 13, which would work. And then we've got these younger, um, a probable wife of W. Cline, possibly Abner, and then a son. So we've still got some contradictions here, don't we? Some significant conflicts. Now, one thing that's really helpful in this project is location. So these Clines move out to Dallas County, Texas. Kaufman County, where that previous census that we talked about, 1860 census, is a neighboring county of Dallas County. And I found records for Abner and Ann, two of those children of John, mentioned the 1850 census. And I found that Clemcy and her Weatherford family with Henderson had all moved to Dallas County, Texas. And in fact, the sister Ann and Clemcy are in the very same township of Saline Township. And so putting all these things together that possibly this family migrated together, maybe at different times, but they all end up out here in the same general area of Dallas County, Texas. Add some more evidence to the fact that this could be Clemcy's family. So you can see why we really need some DNA evidence to help with this. So I have got two DNA tests that are shared with me. You will see both of these individuals, Gary and Lucretia. They are my first cousins once removed. They're my dad's first cousins. Here's my dad. And they are younger children of younger children. And so they are a little bit older than me, but on the same generation as my dad, which is very helpful because I don't have his DNA. And so because they're closer to Clumsy, they could share more matches than me and in larger amounts. The first step with the DNA project is you want to just make sure you're genetically connected to your ancestor. And so here I've got Clumsy Cline and Henderson Weatherford, and you can see they had a lot of children. All these pink and blue names here are daughters and sons. And my line comes through Isabella, and Gary and Lucretia are also coming down through Isabella and Robert C. Royston. But I do have DNA matches between at least me or Lucretia or Gary for all of these independent lines, which is very, very helpful. Now, I will note that I did not put every single match in here from my match list. Instead, I've just chosen those that share the most DNA, and that has helped me to narrow down, trying to get a good broad swath of DNA that's matched. Now, when I was writing my report, I wanted to report on some of these different, all these different connections. And I did talk about our matching through all these different lines. But when I went to look at those children of John C. Cline that would be half siblings to my Clemsy, I did find some descendants. So here is Abner. He's the one that I am hypothesizing he's William Abner Cline. And there's a John M. Cline. We saw that in the 1860 census. And then we have got another sister, a Barbara Ann Cline and an Amanda Cline, all coming down through William Abner. And I was able to find DNA matches that had decent trees that went back to all of these Clines. Now, what if I had not had the DNA of Gary and Lucretia? Because I did not share DNA with all of these people, but at least one of us did. So let's take a look at Barbara. You'll notice only one DNA match comes down through Barbara. And here she is right here in my table. This is that DNA match Barbara. I don't share any DNA with Barbara. Gary does not share any DNA with Barbara. Only Lucretia shares DNA with Barbara. So if I had not asked Lucretia to share her DNA results with me, I would not have picked up on this, and I would not have had this branch represented as additional evidence for this connection. And you can see there are some other places that are X'd out. I did not share DNA with John 1, but Lucretia and Gary both did. Again, I did not share with John 2, but they both did. Here we have an interesting one where I share more with John 3 than Lucretia. So when you do something like this, it really helps you see how DNA inheritance can vary. But there are several of these that I would have had no DNA evidence for without having access to their results and being able to look at them as well. So here is just that example of Barbara, and this comes through Clemsy's daughter, Eliza. And you can see right here, Clemsy's daughter, Eliza, and she shares a good amount of DNA coming from Barbara. And although I can see how much they share, which is great because I can add this descendant to my Airtable base now and use this as evidence that we've got another person here, another descendant of Clemsy matching up with Barbara. She did not share her match list with me, this cousin, and I could ask her now to share because I see that she has inherited some of that DNA from the Clines. So she would be a good person to reach out to and ask to share her DNA with me because hopefully she would pick up some more Cline matches and maybe even help me move back a generation. So hopefully that gives you an idea of why it might be helpful to ask DNA matches to share. But how do you go about doing that? I would suggest that you establish a relationship first. Don't lead off with share your matches with me in a message, but start off with something nice, explain your research project. If you have written a report or you have a little summary, you could send that. You could send them a diagram about how you connect with them. And then make sure you explain how their DNA is really valuable and how they will have different matches than you, and it could really help with your project. And then I always like to send a link to the specific instruction page. This is coming from Ancestry, so they can see this is legitimate. This isn't you just trying to look at their DNA. And if you've done all these previous steps, chances are that they will be likely to help you out. And you can just look at their matches as a viewer. They don't need to give you access to do anything with them, if they don't want you messing up their matches. But I always ask if it's okay if I can be a collaborator so I could add notes and, really, really collaborate with them. So any way we can get more access, more DNA for coverage of our ancestor, that will be so helpful for us in our project. So hopefully that helps you have an idea of why you would want to bother with having someone share their DNA results with you. Thank you.